Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to an April. Wow, we're already in April. An April 10th edition of the MSP Initiative MSP Live podcast. Lots of stuff always going on in our world and in the sandbox, we like to call it. Check out mspinitiative.com. I know as the year finally breaks out of the winter, although it feels very winter-like, at least where I'm at. It's still cold for some reason. Got fake spring. And can't wait for actual spring, apparently. But hey, all the ice cream and water ice places are going. So mspinitiative.com, you'll see all the stuff coming up, especially in June. That's where stuff that we are working on specifically seems to kick off. We're headed to Dublin, we're headed to Tampa, specifically around a couple of events. So check it out. This podcast is being recorded, like all the other ones we've done forever and ever and ever, and we post them there, which links back to the podcast and the audio and the video and the YouTubes and all that jazz. So that's where you'll find all of this information, including the general industry calendar that we continue to update as we learn about new things. And there's over 300 events on there for 2025, believe it or not. So I feel like that list continues to grow. There it all is, mspinitiative.com. Today, we bring someone from the great country of Canada. I haven't, I've only been twice, but stopped at border security twice. Just gotta say, they're pretty sticklers up there, at least from that aspect. But we welcome Sandy Mcgrath. How you doing today, Sandy?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
Doing all right, man. Doing okay. Yeah. The one time, I always got weird questions crossing the U.S. Canadian border. Like, the typical questions like, where are you going? Where did you come from? And how long do you plan to be here? No problem, no problem. Then they ask me things like, well, how much currency do you have on your person? I was like, $20. Is that okay? Yeah. And you want me to check out the change in my little change cup? Yeah, they didn't like that. Or do you have any alcohol with you? And I was like, does Monster Energy count as alcohol? They didn't like that. They didn't like that response. So I don't know. Was interesting. Now it hasn't been recent. I know anytime we ever do an event in Canada and we have to ship something to Canada, we always, Jen will laugh because we just had to go through this, and I was like, I don't know, like, usually get stuck, right? In like the shipping customs, like whatever happens there, and doesn't show up when you think it's gonna show up. And that's, by the way, that's not just a Canadian thing. If you ever ship anything to like,
I was
know,
gonna say that's a
you,
conference thing.
yeah, if you, like how many times have you shown up to an event and like the booth didn't show up for so and so, whatever, and it's because it got stuck in customs or something, right? So what can I say?
Starting to live that life a little bit now with the work with Can IT Con and working with the vendors to understand the differences between shipping their booths to the shipping company versus to the hotels or to the resorts, um, and going through all the ins and outs of how that can quickly, very, very quickly become a nightmare. And trying to work with the vendors. It's actually, knock on wood, I think we've been pretty good most of the time, but there was a couple that I think they got their stuff as the doors were opening for like people to start coming into the vendor halls.
So a lot of different people listen to this for different reasons, this podcast series that we run, but note to everyone who, even like, let me give you a prime example. Prime example. I have some customers over in Ireland, and we were in the midst of the end of the NFL season going into the playoffs. And my customer in Dublin, his son, like adopted, started like subscribe to the NFL International package, was watching the games on the iPad at night, whatever. And I was like, you know what? I will do my job as a good, warm-blooded Philadelphia Eagles fan, and let me send you some Philadelphia Eagles stuff, right? Like, hat, shirt, like nothing crazy, right? Like stuff that we find on every shelf in any store here, like, and have at it. So I shipped it over. It went to and from Ireland back to the US two times. Like I tracked the package. I'm like, whatever happened to this? Went back to the post office, like next door. I'm like, can you tell me where this is? They're like, well, it went and then it came and then it went again, and then it came again, and then it went again. And I'm like, I didn't pay you 3 times. So like, at what point do we give up and say that this package isn't getting delivered? It ultimately got delivered, Sandy, 2.5 months later. Like, I don't know. So my point to you is, and here's my PSA, right? Public service announcement. It may just make sense to source things in the country that you're going, for the end destination, right? Like, instead of
That's got to
shipping
be.
something, print the stuff in the country so that it's a domestic, local delivery, and then this isn't a problem.
I think we started actually getting that set up as a service to like have things set up just in case, because inevitably something wouldn't come with you know, the shipping guys didn't send everything for the booth people, the marketing people didn't send all the stuff. It gets there, they're looking for things, they're missing it, so there's a panic to find a Staples or a whatever close by so that you can get something printed, get it out there, have it ready. And so we started kind of accounting for that. And the morning of like day one is basically like, hey, what are you missing? Are you missing anything? Like, what do you need help with? We've got somebody that can help you. We basically get like the event staff and the vendor, the
Do you have
service
like a screen
providers.
printing t-shirt person in the back room just presses?
Yeah, we're gonna start bringing that just because like every conference I've gone to, and I think some of the more popular booths so I've seen are the guys with their own screen printing for the t-shirts. And they could probably sell their services out to the other vendors who don't have enough or need more t-shirts too as
You'd be
well.
like, hey, we got a full-blown swag marketing section over here. Just take out your credit card, let them know what you need. They'll do it right on the spot. I mean, just saying. So for everybody that doesn't know what Sandy's talking about, we'll let Sandy give his background a little bit, like we always do with everybody on the show, because gives every context, right? Who's coming from where? Can IT Con, right? Sandy, tell us a little bit about it. Why did this event get created? And like, tell us like where it's going, a little bit of history, all that jazz.
Yeah. Uh, Probably back in 20, well, I guess it'd be 2018, 2019. I've been starting to get to go to more and more conferences. And a lot of the biggest and best ones were always down in the States, which wasn't necessarily a problem, but I'm a fairly competitive person. So my mind always went to why can't we have something like this in our own backyard? Why can't, we've gone to Canadian events and half the time it was 20 to maybe 50 people max. It
Yeah.
was low attendance. It wasn't kind of as grand. And so, um, Rob Ray, as most people know, Rob Ray and I had started talking, and um, we had said, like, we really wanted to put a focus on building something like this in Canada. So at the time, it was something like a DattoCon or a Connect event or something like that, something big that, attendance was measured in the four digits. And so we started talking about it, and we were getting things lined up, and we started working with people like Dan Mitchell, Kerry Green, who ultimately they own Alltech, um, and just seeing how we can get this going. We actually did get a lot of support from municipal governments here in Alberta. They were going to
Wow.
start helping out to see what they could do because tech had become, I want to say, like a lot more of a focus. They were diversifying a bit in terms of like instead of just being oil and gas like everybody thinks, they actually were bringing in a lot of investments of like unicorn shops of big tech companies, second major head offices for like things like Amazon's were in the works, things like that. So tech was starting to become a focus. So anybody who was bringing ideas around bringing awareness to technology, especially in Calgary, they were actually getting listened to. Unfortunately, as things were about to get ramped up, COVID hits. So it all went on hold for at least about 2 years at that point, and we just kind of stopped talking about it. Rob and I met again, I think it was 2021. We were at a Kaseya board event, and we said, well, look, like travel's coming back. People are allowed to go places again. What do you think we get this off the ground? And we started working again, and Dan Mitchell, Kerry Green, they really kind of took it and ran with it. And Rob and I were there to support them. And yeah, it just kind of grew and grew, and all of a sudden 2023 they had everything set. We had a great spot out in Banff for the inaugural event. uh took a lot of work, and I remember the first day getting out there, and after getting it all set up and that, being stressed. It's an hour and a half, it's been an hour and a half drive to get to Banff from Calgary, and I remember driving out there and feeling sick, like nobody's going to show up. The vendors, like we used every contact we had of people that we've been working with for 10, 15, almost 20 years in some
So for
cases.
people who are geographically,
Yeah.
challenged, maybe you can explain where Banff is, because I don't think I
Yeah.
ever heard of the place until your event happened.
Yeah, so I guess the best example I can give is if you've been to Denver, and this is the example I get told a lot is if you go into Denver, Denver's a lot like Calgary,
Mm-hmm.
and about 45 minutes to an hour outside, if you go west, you get to the mountains. When you
Mm-hmm.
get to the mountains, the big kind of first place you get to is a place called Canmore, which is absolutely beautiful. Love going there, try and sneak out as often as I can. About 20, 30 minutes past Canmore is it's a national park in Canada, but essentially it's a town called Banff. And
Hmm.
in Banff, they have, big cultural centers. It's a lot of tourism. And one of the places they have there is the uh, the university and the cultural arts center. And it's like it's all I think it's on the side of one of the mountains, and you
Hmm.
overlook like a valley towards one of like the oldest hotels I think in North America. Um, and so we set up that place to be kind of our inaugural showpiece event, and we took a chance. Like it was a lot of these events so far have been kind of a hope and a prayer because they're not in major cities, right?
Mm-hmm.
We did Kelowna last year, and we did Banff year one, but we haven't gone to like the Vancouvers, the Torontos, the Calgarys, the Edmontons, because we wanted to really make the event almost like a destination event,
Right.
something you just get to experience that you may not have ever done before, especially if you've only gone to big cities down the States or in Canada.
Right.
And we wanted it to be more than just the conference. We wanted people to have like a real experience.
Well,
So,
there's something to be said, Sandy, for if it's in my backyard, I may think, hey, no big deal. If I make it, I make it. If I don't, I don't, or I get called away, or it's a home thing, and then all of a sudden, people you're expecting don't make it because it's local.
well, I will say this. One of the things that we really pushed years and years ago, like I think 5, 6 years ago, we really started focusing on building a community, even through just using like WhatsApp, for example, of Canadian MSP owners and leaders that essentially, like, for all intents and purposes, we are direct competitors, but
Hmm.
we actually would see each other and spend a lot of time at events as being like they'd heard all the Canadians together at US conferences and stuff. So we actually spent a lot of time with each other and built a lot of bonds and relationships. So when it came time that we were actually pushing for um, to get support, one of the things that I was really, truly grateful for was how many of all the people that had been with us, along the way, first people to sign up, bought their passes. They were there asking if we needed anything to help facilitate, make the conference great. And they all showed up, right? Like that was the big part of it was we had a ton of support from um, good friends that essentially all run businesses that we all kind of compete against each other, but in a lot of ways our mindsets are pretty similar, that there's enough work for all of us. We don't need to kill each other. And uh
I
yeah,
agree.
we can be competitive. Yeah, we can push each other, but we can also share knowledge and information. We can share things that are coming up. I think some people have even transitioned clients within the group, and it actually made it super seamless and easy. It wasn't working at one, no problem. They were actually talking to somebody else that was in the group's company, and they facilitated the transfer amongst each other very amicably, and it didn't get ugly. And ultimately, the client was happy with it. And um, but yeah, so driving out to Banff. that hour and a half drive, it's absolutely gorgeous because you're facing the mountains, you're driving towards it the whole way. And I'm sitting there just trying not to throw up, thinking no one's going to show up. I'm going to have like, 20, 25 vendors that are going to be looking at me wondering where everyone is. And so when I got out there and I walked in and I saw the place and how beautiful it was, and then registrations started pouring in, and we hit 75, 100, which I know is small numbers, but at the time for us, we weren't we weren't sure who was coming through the door, right?
Right.
So when I started seeing more than 100 and some people come in, I think that was the first time in almost a year I'd kind of taken a big sigh. It was like, okay, people are actually showing up.
That's
Um,
awesome. As a person who's been involved in all facets of events, putting on events, attending events, sponsoring events, it is a tough, tough, tough job. It is not an easy thing.
I
And
think the
everybody always has an opinion. That's
I
for
think one of
sure.
the hardest parts about it was keeping the Americans from trying not to ride the moose and the elk that walked up to the event center. Few of them grabbed their iPhones, started FaceTiming significant others, and then thought it would be a good idea to start trying to pet them. And you got Parks Canada screaming at people, get away from the animals and trying not to get killed because these things will attack you. They seem all nice and quiet until they're stomping you into the ground. So we're all just trying
It's
to
all fun
round
and games
people up.
until you're in the
Yeah.
hospital because somebody, got bit by something, right?
Yeah. We're trying to round them all up and shove them in. And Parks Canada's yelling at us, like, get these people back inside. It's like, look, we could not predict that they would react this way and try to pet or ride an elk. We kind of assumed this was a known do not do. But yeah, I
Oh
guess we'll.
boy. This is like I saw a video clip for a show earlier this morning while I was flipping through the channels, and this person was I had to have been at like a safari park type setup, and they got bit by a camel. And I was like, could you imagine working at an emergency room and they're like, so what brings you in today? Oh, I got bit by a camel that came through my window. Like, could you imagine hearing that?
I would have believed it if it was like large cat, like massive bug that bites and kills, something like that. Camel, not number 5 or 6 even on the list, I don't think.
So what were you doing? Oh, I tried to mount I tried to mount an animal.
Trying to ride this
Didn't go
camel.
well.
I've seen it down in the movies. It looked like it was easy to do.
Yeah.
Um, but
So
yeah, so
so
that's
so
that's kind of
so
the side fun project is Can IT Con, and I
that's
love it
awesome.
because especially because of the reaction even in year two when we went to Kelowna, I think we doubled the numbers. I think we were close to almost 300 you know, without specifics. I think we were close to 300, like 275. Doubled the vendor hall. Vent was about twice the size. And just again, like tremendous support from, other MSPs, Canadian MSPs, Canadian tech people, but also the vendors. Like the vendors really came out and supported us because they wanted to help build big. Like that was the goal, right? Build bigger, better events in Canada. It wasn't that we had anything against the American events. We just wanted to have something in Canada as well. That gave,
It's not a
funny
bad thing.
enough, it gave a lot of people who could never go to the conferences in the States an option. So there was a bunch of people that came up to us and they were like, I don't necessarily have the budget to do a 2000, $2,500 trip down to do some big event down in the States, but you know, I could do something like this, and it gave me an opportunity to talk to vendors I never thought I could, meet people and peer groups and get involved. And so that was really wonderful to see is the opportunities it gave some people that just maybe never had a chance to get access to some of the stuff that they could have really used to help them grow their business or take off as well.
I've said this many times. I'm going to say it again here now. Of the 100% of IT service providers that we would categorize in our subvertical, right? Manage IT services, IT, outsource IT, whatever you want to call it, for small, medium business. I'm going to just define this as sub 200 employees um, of people, companies that you would service, organizations you would service. I know that the number of people who would fit this categorization in terms of unique companies is widely debated. Some people say 55,000 unique. Some people say 95,000 unique, and just in North America, US, Canada. Uh, all that being said, I believe this is a George statistic. Here we go. Done a lot of research, but this is just me. I believe less than 10% of all of the available unique businesses in that categorization on an annual basis make it out to one event a year in our industry.
Yep.
And there's a lot of reasons, right? But the reality is that they're running their businesses and they can't be on the road 350 times a year because that's how many events there are to go to. So that being said, I didn't even think about this until you just said it. Like for me or for you as somebody in Canada to go to pick event, right? Could be DataCon, IT Nation, PAX 8 Beyond, whatever. $2,500 sounds like a lot. I mean, like, I'm
Yep.
just thinking about it. Like, for me, I'm like, if I wanted to go to an Orlando event or a Denver event, my plane ticket round trip from Philadelphia may be, $200-300, get some hotel rooms, a couple $100 a night, Uber, rental car, whatever, whatever. I don't think I'm cracking $1,000. So, like, it's like 2.5x. It's a big difference.
Yeah, because for us, especially going down in the States, right? You got exchange rate, you've got the
Mm.
travel, you got the cost. Passes are all in USD, so a
Mm.
$300 pass turns into a $400 pass pretty quickly or more. Um, you know, 200, $300 a night hotel rooms are, you're adding on that 30% onto that to the exchange rate for all of it.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's like, even coming from where I was before I moved to Alltech, we looked at events very strategically. Like, what was the purpose we were going to be going there for? Was it to further the relationship we had so that we could continue to try and push for better deals so that ultimately the cost of the trip would be a wash, right? Or, if there was ever an opportunity where we could go to do something that would help us, start a new line of business that would make money, you know, we were very fiscally conscious of every dollar going out the door. And unless it was at least bringing a dollar or two back, it was really hard to ever get kind of um, buy-in from the owner at the time to get onto the event kind of
And that's just
schedule.
to send one person. If you're sending more than one person, it just
Right.
exponentially grows. So how about before we get too far, because I know we're already, a little bit into this conversation. Where do people find out more information on Can IT Con for 2025? Like where do they go? Where is it? Where like give us the
Yep.
the the, the elevator pitch here.
Yeah. So Can IT Con September 8th to the 10th. It's going to be in Kelowna. You can go to canitcon.ca, I believe. It's either .ca or .com or both. I believe we still have early bird registration passes up, or I believe they're still on the discounted rate till the end of spring. Um, I believe almost all of our vendor spots are already taken. Um, so I think now it's just a matter of making sure the feedback I was given is we have to do the same VIP party that we had last year. So if you can try and reach out to the vendors that are coming if you have any of those in your pocket that you're using and push to get those VIP passes because it is a very exclusive event. We can only take 100 people to it. Last year,
Mm.
um, it is this kind of it was a really wonderful event. Like the place was it was three floors. The bottom floor was a speakeasy with a live band. The middle floor was like floor to ceiling winery. Top floor was open air kind of lounge area with world class food and more drinks and fun.
And just to be clear, you're not saying that an MSP from the States couldn't go.
No, everybody's welcome. You guys, I was surprised. We actually had a lot of feedback from people that are, pretty regulars on I would say the event schedule or calendars, and they come up to us and they said this is one of the best events they'd ever been to in terms of just being able to have some luxury, have some time to themselves, really enjoy the experience, and then get the takeaways of working with vendors and breakout sessions and do the knowledge learning sessions that they usually do. Um, so yeah, it was really popular event, and so that's why my hope is it continues on the path of doubling every year if we can. We'll see where that takes us next year and the year after. I don't think we're hammered out 100% of where next year is yet, but I know this year is the last year we're going to do it in Kelowna for a bit.
Awesome. So, hey guys, if you're on the US side, and I know a lot of you are, you want somewhere you've never been before, vacationy spot in a pretty good temperature in a September, which I know sometimes hard because kids go back to school and NFL season starts for people like me. Go check this out, kenitcon.ca or .com or both. Um, let's split off here and let's hear a little bit about you, Sandy, for people who've never met you before, and then I want to use the rest of our time to talk about kind of general industry stuff. Pick your brain.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I just recently moved. I'm now the director of technology and infrastructure at Alltech. It's a larger MSP out of Sherwood Park in Edmonton, or outside of Edmonton, Alberta. I'm coming on board to help uh, kind of facilitate and set up the Calgary office and continue down the growth path we're on. Uh, Known Dan Mitchell, Kerry Green, like I mentioned, for you know several years. We had talked before about what it would look like if we could ever figure out a way to pry me away from my previous MSP. And it just so happened last year, the previous MSP I worked for, they were sold to a CPA company.
Hmm,
And then,
that's interesting.
yeah, they had some plans around what they were going to do for service offerings. But ultimately, it wasn't a place I decided I wanted to stick around with anymore, which was a bit heartbreaking because I had spent 14 years there, getting things, you know, kind of stabilized and running and
Hmm.
growing the business to what it was at the point. So still have same team is there, still love them, wish them all the best, but this was a move that I wanted to make for myself. And the timing really worked out well. I messaged Dan and said, "Hey, like, you still interested? Like, how would this look to you?" And he had some plans and ideas. He came back from his trip he was on. I think he was down in Mexico at the time. Um, and came back and showed up in Calgary with the whole executive crew and said, "Look, like, this is what we plan to do. This is what we wanted to do, and this is where we would like you to be with us on this." And it was a pretty easy decision at that point for me. Started March 1st, spending a lot more time up in Edmonton than I had planned for the first month, but that's evening out. The really the really great part for me is working with an executive team that gets it. I'm sure all of us have worked for people before that, like, they are the owners or they are the leaders of the business, but they don't necessarily understand the MSP market, or maybe they're just not involved for whatever reason. It's not their thing. It was, they own the company, but they don't necessarily want to be involved with the company. That's fine. We've all had those challenges and worked with people like that. This time I'm getting to work with, like, good friends that are passionate about growing their business, working on it, but also, like, I don't have to go and explain why certain things are important, why going to certain events are important, why doing certain things are going to be important to an MSP or to clients of an MSP, or you know, why this has to happen. So that is a lot of fun. The first 3 weeks is working with people like that. Um, and then also they made some really smart strategic decisions leading up to me getting there. And one of them was they hired a lady, her name is Allison, to be our um, sales and marketing director. And George,
Hmm.
you've done this long enough. You've been around. You've talked to 10 times more MSPs than I ever will. You always know that at conferences, one of the biggest things that they all talk about is how we all suck at sales and marketing. And
Top three things.
it's
I went to my first event as an MSP in 2002. It's 2025. I am the top three things that I heard on my very first event as an MSP in this industry. I still hear today in the top five things walking in the door as what am I concerned about? What am I here to learn about? Because I ask people point blank, hey, why'd you come? I get the party and networking part, but like, did you come to actually figure out a problem? Like,
yep.
what's on your learning list, right? And this is always in there. And Yeah, I mean, 20 years plus later, we're still arguing the same problem, which is how does an MSP predictably and forecast growth? How do you manufacture growth? What's the plan? And a lot of people, Sandy, and I'm sure, I would love to hear what, is different here, but it's hey, referrals and word of mouth and make people feel good so that they're willing to recommend you and like wait for the door, kind of the bell to ring when somebody's willing to do that. And like that's always gonna happen. That's just business, right? But you can't really plan a trajectory that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So like even um when I was at Final Frontiers, like I'd been through a couple different rounds of like what I would consider for our size at the time of the business, large investments into sales and marketing, paying for salaries for people for a year,
Hmm.
buying all the tools and buying the lists and revamping the websites and doing all that stuff. And I'd gone through it two separate times. And unfortunately, neither time I think really worked out where we had more than maybe one new client come in per year. Like it really just
Wow.
really didn't work.
So that's your cost of customer acquisition is astronomical
It
at that
was
point.
like 250,000 kind of thing, right? So
Mm,
and what we had always done, like most MSPs probably do, is our service and our referrals were what got us most of our new
mm,
business, whether it was
mm.
projects from existing clients, referrals from existing clients to new business because of doing a good job. So coming here, that's still the case where we have those referrals and the word of mouth, but the relief in it all is Allison is tremendous at what she does on the sales and marketing piece. She's somebody I would like. I wish I could have only dreamt of having at Final Frontiers, and if I had of 5 years ago, we could have been 10 times the size, easy. You know, um, and the nice part is like when I sit down and I work with her and I look at the numbers, it's not fluff. Like it's not just someone who filled a HubSpot funnel with 10,000 random names of people that may never talk to you. It's like by the time she's showing me what's going on, it's people that are in the process of reviewing a final agreement and they're about to sign and we're doing an onboarding project. Like,
So let's talk about a super qualified
yeah,
lead here. We're not just
yeah, like,
talking about a name.
yeah, she's like, when we're talking about the sales funnel is like a legit sales funnel of my job is getting the business ready to double.
Okay.
Like in the calendar year, we are legit looking at doubling the business because
That's an aggressive goal, Sandy. To double in
it,
one
well,
year.
that's the problem. It's not a goal. Like she's when I'm talking about qualified leads and businesses, it's like people that are literally the number of endpoints coming in. Like I think in her first from January to March, by the end of March, which was my first month there, she had already facilitated, I think, about almost 30% growth.
Wow. You guys must have a magic wand. So let me ask you a couple targeted questions here, just for the
Yep.
people who listen to this who maybe don't understand the nuances between what does it look like to be IT services managed services provider in Canada versus the US, for example.
I think the big thing right now is we're catching up to the US in terms of compliancy stuff. Um,
Mm.
I feel like cybersecurity, the US has been a little bit more um, standardized and probably they've always been, I think the metric used to be 5, 6 years ahead, then it was like a couple years ahead. Now I think that gap has narrowed a bit in terms of like what's happening, but compliancy stuff is definitely where we're picking up on, but we're nowhere near where the compliancy requirements are in the US, I don't think. But
Mm.
that's rapidly changing here. Business insurance is kind of the tail that wags the dog up here. And a lot of the things that have changed since about 2018, 2019 is a result of business insurance mandating companies do the things that a lot of people in our industry have been telling clients they should do, but have never had the ability to like force them to do it, right? Like MFA was no mystery in 2018, 2019. Everybody knew they had it. But it
Hmm.
wasn't until business insurances started saying you're not going to get your business insurance, or you can't bid on these RFPs, or you're not allowed to have these partnerships with people that don't have it, to when all of a sudden it started getting mass adopted and pushed out. And ever
Hmm.
since then, every year it's evolving and evolving and evolving to where we're seeing um, insurance renewal forms now coming out asking for like scene tools and SAT training, and what are you looking at for compliancy, and what are you mandating in terms of like partnerships agreements, like what do you have in there that requires businesses to be at a certain level before you'll work with them. And it's like um a lot of that here, we're seeing a lot more requests now around SOC 2, for example. That's coming up where and it's like, there's no real rhyme or reason. It's not like there's a certain size company. Like we've seen big companies put it down to service providers that are 20, 25 people or less and say, hey, like within the next 18 to 24 months, I'm going to be sending out a memo that says you have to have SOC 2 or else you're not allowed doing work for us anymore. So this is kind of like my early warning to you to go get it, right?
Wow.
Um,
So
and
this is
so
your client to you.
our clients are coming back to us saying, "Hey, our clients, so the clients of the clients, are going to be mandating these things. We
Mhm.
need to have it. Are you able to help us with it?"
I got it. So what
Right?
size does this usually pop up?
I've seen requests where it was as small as 18, 19 people, and then we've got companies that are in the hundreds and they're asking about it too. So,
18, 19 coming down for SOC 2, huh?
yep,
That's
like
not cheap.
no, and that is the problem right now is a lot of these people, there's a reason they hadn't been doing it before, right? Not just because they had no idea what it was, maybe, but like also you're looking down the barrel of what is essentially like a new employee or my SOC 2 audit, right? And
Right.
nobody nobody's making me get my SOC 2 audit yet, but I could use that new employee to take on the projects or the work for the business we have. That's where the money's going to go. Um, assuming they have the money to even do that, right? So if they do, now all of a sudden they're looking at it and going, well, the cost of doing business, like this partnership requires it. These are our biggest clients. Maybe they're 50% of our revenue. It's not a matter of like, do we still want to do it? Like, we have to do it, right? Like, to stay alive and stay in business, we need to do these things, right? So we're seeing more of that. But like, as you know, like the tough part is you got to have it, and you got to have it for a bit of time before you're asked for it.
Right.
So getting people in
Not,
this
you can't do it
mindset of
quickly.
understanding, right? Like, this isn't something you can ask me about on Friday, and by Monday I've got a piece of paper in your hand and you're all set to go and it's okay. You know, the fastest I've heard, and I'm sure viewers and people have different opinions on that, but the fastest I've heard is like, if you've got a good relationship with an auditor and the documentation and stuff, it's like a minimum 6 month process.
I think
Closer to a year is
that's
the
pretty
average,
true.
but
In what I know, yeah.
fast tracking, like everything going your way, I've heard 6 months. So
Hmm.
it's like trying to explain to people, like, you have to look at this and go, is there a chance I'm going to be asked for this in the next 12 months or less? If so, you need to start today. Like, you should have already started, but you got to start at least today.
But
And
but
every day
Sa-
you put that off is makes it
but
worse.
Sandy, I mean, from your perspective, I mean, put your finger up in the air for me for a second.
Yeah.
Of all, if we just talk about Canada and we just talk about sub 200 employee, companies and the IT companies or VARs or MSPs or whatever acronym you want to do that services them, what percentage do you think are fully under an MSP model versus more of the traditional VAR model? I gotta think that, or what I've been told, and that's why I'm asking you because I'm just going off of like past conversations, like there's still a large percentage of people who I wouldn't necessarily categorize as MSPs. And let me define it just a spec further, where the majority of their business is on monthly or annual reoccurring contracts.
Yeah. I think the terms, like, I think a lot of businesses get lumped together.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember going to a conference I think it was not even, might have been 5 years ago, not even, and sitting down in a room with 20 MSPs, and out of that 20, six or seven of them were one man shops that went out and filled out the RFPs and then contracted the work out to external help desks. And
Mm-hmm.
they just took a chunk of the money. They were classified as an MSP. Um, they had no managed services. They just did projects, or they would do like break fix support, and they had a contracted with like a help desk, an external help desk. Then there was, another couple of guys that were there that had them and a tech, and
Mm-hmm.
less than half of their business, I would say probably closer to a quarter of it, was actually like reoccurring. The rest was all break fix, like pay per hour. And then out of those like 20, there was like me and maybe one or two guys that were like more than probably 75-80% of our business was like managed services. They always had those clients kicking around that we had since the start of the business that never wanted to do managed services, that you always kept because you didn't want to kick them out, but as they weren't a big enough pain in the ass yet to make you want to get rid of them, but
Right.
you knew you wanted to, you just didn't have it in you or didn't have the time to do it. Like, that's why I always love when I go to conferences and I hear people telling other MSPs, or MSPs telling other MSPs, like, about how, like, well, they don't do any break fix and you got to tell them this and this is how you got to do these contracts. And I'm just like, I guarantee you, if I go back to your office and sit down with it, you've got the same client breakdown as just about anybody else. You've got time materials clients that you won't admit to. We all have them. Everybody knows it. Don't lie. Like, come on. So
So,
yeah,
so,
I'd
so,
say the
so, so
breakdown is
that was
still a
five
large
years
much.
ago. That's 5 years.
Yeah.
What's 2025 look like from your guesstimate?
Um, I think 2025. So I think the way that the MSPs are looking to me is a large portion of revenue is going to come from a smaller portion of projects and not from a standard billing model.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the example I'm talking about. So last year we went to Beyond,
Yep.
and I watched MSP after MSP asking Microsoft reps and some of the Beyond people, how do I sell AI and Copilot projects?
Fair question. It was brand new.
And at the time, a lot of them had said, the only way I know how to sell a project is a per hour rate.
Mm-hmm.
I scope out the project, I sell it per hour. Based on that, that's how I scope a project.
Yep.
And the feedback that I was giving people is you have to look at it. This is where your relationships in MSP are going to be so crucial, because you building a strong relationship with the executive team and the ownership team means you get brought in on the decision making process. You get a front row seat to understanding the pains and the problems from the client. But you also get things like, what's it costing them not to solve that problem? What are things like, what's it costing them for their employees to struggle and keep burning away doing things in a certain way?
It's a little bit harder to make that calculation, but you got to dig into the details for sure.
Well, and so part of that is understanding that, you're not selling a project at a per hour rate. You're solving a solution that could be, why would you sell a $2,500 project to solve what's costing that business $500,000 a year,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, so your typical MSP projects that are only sold per hour, you could be sold like, and of course the clients are going to love it. Absolutely. I'll sign a $2,500 project that's solving a $500,000 problem all day, every day.
If that was the math every time, I don't think you lose.
Right. And so I think that there's going to be a lot more projects that's going to require more business acumen, um, soft skills, things like that, that aren't necessarily like your typical technical projects, that could result in massive revenue eh, growth for MSPs. And I think MSPs are in a really strong position to utilize the relationships that they've been building and fostering with executives and decision makers for years. And now you're going to be able to sit at the table and talk to them in a way that nobody else is going to understand, short of the people on that executive team, but then don't short sell yourself. Like, don't just do the project because you only, that's how you normally do projects, is like a per hour rate thing. Like,
Yeah.
look at it as like, what are you selling like, how much is it costing to solve that problem? What is it costing you not to solve that problem?
Value-based selling. Yeah.
Right. And so I think there's more of that, a lot more of that coming. And the MSPs that can figure it out faster are going to grow and have a lot more revenue without necessarily increasing headcount a massive amount, right?
Hmm.
Because it's not like the same project hours are going to be worth a whole lot more depending on the value base that you're selling versus your typical SharePoint migration, your Office 365 migration, your whatever XYZ deployment that you're selling at 120 to 150 to 250 or whatever it is per hour. Now, what you have to start looking at and balancing is like, do we want to start selling these projects like this? Maybe I only do one project out of every 10, but a $500,000 project versus $10,000 of 320 hours a month, you know,
So I'm here. So I'm hearing. I don't know if we got to the answer on the original question, which is like, what is the 2025 like intermixing of what Canada IT service providers look like? But what I did hear from you though, which is still a very good point, is you got to be really select. Like your time is finite, right? You
yeah,
only have so much of it. It's more valuable if you just if your project if the work that you're doing brings in more profit, more revenue for the amount of time that you're putting out. You need to be selective on what you're spending your time on.
yeah, or at least be aware of what those are worth to you and what they're worth to the clients. It's not to say that the traditional projects should go away, you should stop doing them. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that there's a line of business that's available to MSPs that I feel they're strongly set up to succeed at based on the relationships you're already probably fostering and building.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's time to look at them as terms of a consulting practice, whether it's VCIO, VCSIO, or whatever the acronym is, um, to really, push that home, especially because like services are being commoditized, right? Like, you can build AI chatbots, and I've talked to the other MSPs that are like building AI services that essentially will wholesale replace tier one, right? Will it ever do it 100%? Probably not. And there's always going to be the clients that will
There's a
prefer
big
talking to
debate.
a
There's a
human.
big debate on this. There's a
But
big
there's a
debate.
lot of self-serve office options that maybe gets rid of like 80% of what you know is a tier one now, right?
Sure.
Um, so where you're going to be better suited is if you're building those strong consulting relationships so that you're not just seen as a commodity. You're not just seen as somebody like an internet provider that they can just change if they don't get whatever they want, right? Like, that's where your relationship building, like if you're not actively doing it and you're just somebody who's showing up once a month or once a quarter, proving you're doing what you already said you would do in your contracts and then leaving, and maybe every once in a while they'll kick some work over to you, not because you brought it to them and said, hey, I think this will be good for your business, we think that this will help you, but just them saying, hey, we need this. And if you're lucky enough they brought it to you because you're already the IT guys, you could be in for some trouble, or it could be, a stressful time. This is where I was like, I'm pushing people. So for the 2025 thing, I don't know if the ratio will definitely change. I think what you're going to see is I think more MSPs that have managed services are going to be in a better spot, um, to handle the evolution that's going to be required of MSPs.
Okay.
Like, because we went from like, 5, 10 years ago, you could be a generalist as an MSP and take care of whatever. Now you're having to become a little bit more hyper focused on what are some of the service offerings and products you're doing, what kind of, security solutions and services are you focused on in that. Now it's going to be, are you a trusted partner through your own compliancy that'll help other clients get their compliancy, but also help them consult at almost a VCIO level, right? And you'll slowly see MSPs that can't do those things, they'll disappear or get gobbled up by the ones that can. Um, And so that, that evolution, whoever can kind of get themselves ready for that evolution again, that's probably what 2025 I think looks more like to me, is the ones in Canada specifically that are ready for the compliancy part, more of, the continuing cybersecurity. And then afterwards, I mean, it's like you've got AI on hand, you've got quantum computing, like security as we all know it is going to fundamentally change when quantum kicks in. So like the
Yeah.
security you're doing now will be radically different in probably 5 years or less, right? Like, is security even going to be a thing that we can manage? Who knows? Maybe there's a world where the MSP market's not even allowed to touch security, maybe because of compliance requirements, and it's a completely security focused business that has to do it as a service because you're not allowed to through partnerships or business insurance. Who knows, right?
Yeah,
So,
definitely something to keep an eye on. How do you guys up there handle you mentioned currency fluctuation just to go in events, but I gotta assume a lot of the things that you consume from other vendors, which most technology companies you have a lot of vendors, like the currency fluctuation is not a small conversation for you, and that has to be changing on a regular. How do you handle that?
well, I was going to ask you if I have to pay a tariff to be on this call with you. Like, is there something coming back my way? Am I going to get a bill, or do I charge you, or what's happening here? Like,
I mean, if you don't charge me and I don't charge you, then like we're
we'll
good,
just
right?
we'll just be
Yeah.
good about this. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as a Canadian MSP, a big focus is to find partners and vendors that sell services in Canadian dollars, right?
Yeah.
Not having to deal with the constant fluctuations and changes. But I would say that, like, you know, even
Even
5 years
Microsoft
ago,
changes their currency every what, quarter, half year? I don't know how often that.
right? I think it's yearly. Like, there's fluctuation changes on, the same license could change 10 to 30% swings year over year, right? And never usually down. So
Yeah.
it's not usually up here, it's not like the prices ever go down and all of a sudden I'm telling a client, hey, by the way, next year the price is going to be a lower one. It's 5% here, 10% here, 30% here. The big thing is previously was switching to agreements that had nothing baked in. You couldn't have any kind of licenses baked in unless you had firm commitments from the vendors. I know a lot of MSPs, they're changing the terms of their master agreements where they reserve the rights to, change prices when the vendors change prices, or they have
Yeah.
schedules every year where they get to review and add on the markups or the changes.
So
Um,
the super bundle for you is not a thing. You have to hard separate products, SaaS subscriptions versus labor projects. Like anything that you can sell in terms of time is separated out
yeah.
from everything else.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's how it is for us, but I'm saying that's how I've seen a lot of MSPs have to switch and change to,
Yeah.
because it was just like when you ran the numbers and you signed an agreement for, let's say it was 140 a user per month, but you had a baked in office license in
Hmm.
2017, and that license at the time cost you $15. Well,
Yeah.
now that license costs you $20 and you didn't renew or update the pricing and you were too afraid to have the conversation with the client. Well, all of a sudden that 140 or whatever you signed it for is really it's 120,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
the profitability of your agreements is actually doing this instead of going up, or at least even maintaining. And if in reality, and this is business owner, unless you're growing, I think it's like 8 to 10%. That like 8 to 10% is basically maintaining,
Yeah.
right? So it's like
100% right.
which not to go off on any kind of weird swings or tangent, but I went to a couple conferences last year and they showed, I think one of them was Jay's from Canalysis, and one of them might have been a Kaseya event. And they talked about the breakdown of profitability of MSPs.
Mhm.
And it blew my mind as to how many, I think it was 30+% don't even know if they're making money. 30% are like losing money. Another 20% are basically breaking even. And it was like the top like 10% of all MSPs are ones that are actually making money. And it wasn't making money as in like 50% growth year over end. These guys are rolling around in doubloons. It's like they're doing good to maintain as is. They're above that kind of 8 to 10% kind of revenue growth numbers year over year. So they're at like closer to a, like 11 to 15, let's say. They're doing okay. They didn't really break that down past that. It was just that they were making money. And that shocked me. I think the biggest shock was the ones that didn't know if they were making money at all.
I, I mean, I don't know what happens up there, but over here, like you got to at least do enough that you can file your tax return at the end of the year, right? Like,
I didn't understand it either, and I was like, I don't, it wasn't my problem to figure out at the
no,
time, and I wasn't going to
you're
dig into
good.
it, but I figured enough people asked enough questions and enough surveys to find out that there was a 30 plus percent of people who actually had no idea their fiscal numbers as to whether or not they were successful, or even making enough money that in a year's time they could keep the lights on. I was like, that's wild to me.
That's very scary. So like this is like, I mean, 10 minutes ago you're talking about, hey, I think like generalist is gonna kind of fade a little bit, and like people who hyper focus are gonna start to grow versus not, and the other guys are gonna start to fade away. Here we're this is an extreme in the other side of the spectrum here. It's are you even alive and operating in 6 months from now?
Yeah.
Like
I think, well, and a lot of it too for me is like I'm not I'm not the smartest technical person. I get around and stuff. But I, even in 2015, when I was trying to figure out like where I wanted to go with career and stuff, and I made a decision then, like, do I want to keep trying to be a technician, go down this road of training and growth? And actually, what I realized I really loved to do was I loved meeting with businesses and business leaders and figuring out what was success to them,
mm-hmm.
not just success in their industry, but what specifically to their company they saw as being successful, and how could technology help facilitate that success. So a business degree at the time made the most sense to me. And I was very, very fortunate to have really tremendous entrepreneurial mentors for the last like 15 years. And a lot of the stuff that I've got experience to was seeing like startups, how these entrepreneurs got started, how they grew, how they managed finances, how they saw things like growth plans and business development. Um, and so when I see the numbers on like for example, the financial numbers and that, like those kind of things always stuck with me, and I always was very fascinated by that to figure out what went into it and how it happened. And so like for me, the business side of it was always super exciting, and supporting teams and helping people grow and be successful was like my focus. Like that's what I love to do. Um, and so like, you know, going back to you're talking about like the generalists, like I don't necessarily know if they're going to die off, but I think they're going to have a much harder time,
That's
because
fair.
I think a lot of people are looking for people that are like um, the best, or at least the top bracket of what they do, and they need to, right? Because like if you're being mandated as a business to do something, you're not being mandated. Anybody off the street isn't going to just check the box. Like these companies usually have compliancy requirements, or partnership requirements of people that are actually able to do these things. So like you can't just mail it in. You got to be striving to be one of the best in what you're doing. So that does require some focus and some hyper focus on different areas or verticals you're going to be doing.
100%. I know we're coming up on the hour, Sandy. You got a lot of information up in your head and a ton of experience behind you, which is awesome. And so, like, if you didn't catch it, Sandy's been in the IT services MSP land for a long time. He comes with, I mean, next time we'll do this over a beer, but
Yep,
um,
I'd love
I'm
to.
sure in person maybe. But you know what? Sandy's a guy who, if you send him a message online, you ask him a question, I bet you he'll reply.
Yeah,
So so if you
I'd
want to
love
look
to.
him up, for everybody who especially if you're listening to the audio version of this, Sandy Sandy McGrath McGrath. He's over at AltTech ALT-TECH up in Calgary, or that's where the office
They're
is.
in Sherwood Park. I'm in Calgary.
Got it.
Calgary office is getting worked out as we speak.
Got it. Love the hockey in the background. Too bad my hockey in Philadelphia has been so bad for so long, but hey, my Eagles won the Super Bowl, so I'll take something.
Yeah,
So check out Can IT Con, Google it, or see if it's .ca.com. Check that out, especially if you're looking for a change of scenery and like not Orlando for every other event, like I feel has been the case
Or
for
Vegas.
years. Yeah, Vegas. Yeah, Vegas too. Vegas has been another one. But yeah, I mean, different view, different personalities, different, but I gotta think Canada in September is probably pretty good weather, right? So we're not totally
We
crazy.
we had a tremendous luck of weather when the conference went on. I think it was like mid 20s almost the entire
That's
time. It was
Celsius,
sunny.
not
Celsius,
Fahrenheit.
sorry. Yeah. Um yeah, so we lucked out and it was absolutely beautiful. And I'm praying to whoever will listen that this year we get the same luck and people come up and have a wonderful time again.
Can't wait to see how it works out. You guys are doing great work up there. Sandy, definitely will catch up with you shortly. Thank you for coming on. This is
Thanks
long
for having me,
overdue.
buddy.
For everyone else, guys, we recorded this session. It'll be up on mspinitiative.com, which will take you to YouTube and all the other good places. And we'll catch you guys on the next one. Have a good one, everyone, and stay safe out there.
Thanks, everybody.